Hello. So for this week's journal assignment, I will be discussing a recent patient encounter that we had, myself and my current clinical instructor, where it was a visit with a male pediatric young man who had been getting in some trouble in school. He does have a diagnosis of ADHD. His grandmother is his current guardian. His mother is one of the things that I gathered when we were doing his assessment. The mother isn't present. The father isn't present in his life either. They both have been doing some jail time for a crime that they committed together, and he was being raised by his grandmother. The young man who was in middle school now, he had been having some issues with behaviors in school, and he had a few times he had been written up, and he had even been suspended a few times. Well, recently there was a situation in school where a young lady stated that he made a sexually inappropriate comment to her in the classroom, and the grandmother just kept repeatedly over and over talking about how the other kids who were his friends were also involved, and none of them seemed to have got the same amount of punishment as her grandson, where they were still in school, but the school was trying to completely expel him and send him to an alternative school. And even though he does have a excuse me, a diagnosis of ADHD, I did myself hear a lot of other different characteristics about his behaviors and things that I do feel that eventually his diagnosis is going to change. He does have a lot of being non-compliant. Of course, he says a lot of things he shouldn't say. He's very moody. I know a lot of that, like I said, does have something to do with ADHD, because he had issues with concentrating in school. But a lot of what was being discussed, I don't think was ADHD. I do think it's going to be more diagnosis in the future. His medication that he currently was on was for ADHD, and he was getting the Ritalin, generic brand of Ritalin, and that medication doesn't seem to be helping. The grandmother said initially it was helping, but she didn't think it was currently helping, and she was very upset with the school system because she felt like her grandson didn't deserve to be put out of school. The comment that he made, other young men made it as well, and it shouldn't have been that harsh. To me, this situation stuck out to me because it wasn't the behaviors the young man had, it was more of the grandmother not understanding or bringing to light that the things that he said was wrong. It wasn't or did with some of his actions that he was doing in school was wrong, because it wasn't just that. It was also like walking out of class, disrespecting the teachers and things like that. Everything to me, she seemed to compare to other kids doing it and getting away with it instead of him just not doing it at all. So that's why I felt like it was a very unique situation, because most grandparents are the opposite. They're trying to teach their kids to be great and do the best, and they want them to be the best that they can be and be better than their parents because of what the parents were dealing with, which is currently being in prison. She did make some medication adjustments for him. The nurse practitioner that I'm working with currently for clinical, she did notify the grandmother that she would provide paperwork to the school that was needed to not excuse his actions, but to kind of give them an understanding of what some of his actions is based on what his diagnosis is and some of the behaviors that he might have in school. But I did notice that the grandmother never once made the grandson take accountability for his actions. And I felt like that is kind of enabling his behaviors, and it may lead to something further. Because if he says something sexually inappropriate to a young lady and the grandmother's not saying that's not okay, versus, well, he did it and got away with it, it next time it could move up to him even being physically aggressive or something with a young lady who isn't okay with it in a sexual way. So I just felt like the grandmother isn't a good fit for the grandson either, just like the parents weren't, which could have a lot to do with why the mom or either the dad is the way they are, and also having some charges with the law. But I do feel like the nurse practitioner was very professional with the grandmother. I do feel like she could have possibly maybe brought it up, like how did you deal with it with him versus how are you dealing with it with the school. I do think she's great. My clinical instructor is wonderful, but some things, I feel like that's all part of psych with the patient and understanding the patient and the patient's behaviors and not excusing their behaviors. Maybe understanding their behaviors, but not excusing their behaviors when they're wrong. The nurse practitioner does have a very serious role when it comes to this type of situation with any patient, no matter the age, because any type of abuse to another patient, whether it's physical or verbal, is not okay. And addressing it, even if it's something simple as making a medication adjustment or referring him to a different type of resource that he may need help with, because, like I said, it could lead to something else. What I gained from this situation was probably how I personally felt I would have handled it myself, and some of the things I would have brought up. The negative part, like I said, was feeling like the grandmother was more making excuses for her grandson versus actually giving him, not, I'm not going to say physically scorning him, but at least letting him know that it's not okay, and verbally letting him know that she's not okay with what he did, which I never one time heard her say. Um, and I hope to be present for another visit with this same patient in the future just to see how things turned out. I do think he's going to be put out of school, and I do feel that maybe the reason why he is being expelled versus the other kids not is because this is a repetitive thing for him versus they may have just had a one-time situation where they got in trouble, but he's continuously doing things, and that's what the grandmother also didn't seem to understand, that this isn't the first thing he's done, and he's continuing to do things. There's always a behavior. Even when I look back at his notes in the past, there's always a behavior with him. It's something in school. And like I said, the nurse practitioner has a very important role, and I didn't gain a lot of what I felt like was positive on the grandmother side. The nurse practitioner did. She was professional with the grandmother, but like I said, I just would have probably asked a few more questions. And that's about it. Thank you.